And we're super excited to have her, give her this opportunity. But yeah, thank you again to all of you. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being panelists. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have today. I will bow out in a second so that we can get started. But thanks again, and excited to hear your expertise. All right, Sheridan, I will let you take it from here.
Okay. Welcome to the second of many conversations titled A Seat at the Table with PlayVS Game Changers. I'm Sheridan, your host. A little bit about me before we get started. I'm the social media manager for Florida State Esports, graduating this December. I have completed a few projects celebrating women in gaming, and I am absolutely honored to be part of this Game Changer initiative with PlayVS. And as a leader of my college's esports club, I am super excited to find out how to cultivate an inclusive space in esports from these amazing women in the industry. So let's get started and introduce the panelists. And apologies if I butcher any of your names. So the first one we have is Dr. Migliore. She is a licensed medical doctor, avid gamer, founder of GamerDoc, and president of Queer Women in Esports. She is dedicated to helping gamers of all skill levels game healthier, better, and longer, as well as advocating for women and LGBTQ individuals in competitive video gaming. Our second panelist is Amanda Stevens. Amanda is an esports jack of all trades, having worked as a journalist, an editor, a host, and a diversity and inclusion consultant. Recently, Amanda partnered with Cloud9 for their Pride 2020 initiatives and raised $10.2K for Trans Lifeline with her Street Fighter V tournament Transitional Combat. Our final panelist today is Jessica Crabb. She is a senior product designer at PlayVS in Los Angeles, California. Previously, she's designed and researched experiences for Grindr, Patreon, and various high-profile clients at Pivotal Labs. She is passionate about inclusivity for LGBTQ+ folks, women, and gender minorities in tech, and she is the founding lead of PlayVS Employee Resource Group for LGBTQ+ employees and allies. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and let's dive right in. We'd love to learn a little bit more about how each of you started your career. Dr. M, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Thanks for that lovely introduction, Sheridan.
No problem.
So I am a licensed medical doctor. I took a pretty traditional path in that I went from high school to college, college to med school to training, residency training. And then I was going to keep going down that path and go to fellowship and then get the academic job and then get the private practice job, which is pretty traditional for medical doctors. But I decided to call an audible. A couple really meaningful things really broke that cycle. But, one of them is what we're talking about today, creating safe spaces. And the things that we're all going to be doing and talking about. So I decided to, instead of treating traditional athletes, I was going to treat esports athletes. I've been a gamer my whole life. I've seen the toll that gaming can place on your body, and I decided I wanted to do something about it. Similarly, I was in the competitive scene for a little while when I was younger. This was around the time that I was coming out too. So I had a pretty distasteful experience with the COD community. So I did my backup plan, went to medical school. And now that I'm on the other side, I'm trying to make sure that that doesn't happen for other people like me. So through Queer Women of Esports, it's a nonprofit that I formed this year. We are building, like you said, inclusive spaces in competitive gaming. So how I got started is basically getting a bunch of training and then saying enough is enough. Let's change things. So not helpful, I would say, not helpful for a lot of people.
Amanda, would you like to tell us about how you got started in your career?
Yeah, so somewhat similarly to Lindsey, I started my I started off like a lot of people, went to college for journalism and English studies with minors in gay and lesbian studies and women's studies. And close to like my senior year of college, I had a lot of family problems and decided to take a leave of absence that I have not returned to yet. But because I had a lot of friends that had graduated and were doing, you know, different things in games journalism, a couple of people had reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to write about Magic the Gathering and other games. And that was, I was like, all right, well, like I have this retail job. I might as well like put that couple, you know, $1,000 to good use. So I started doing just general games journalism and writing about Magic. Eventually, I got bit pretty hard by the League of Legends bug. This was like towards the end of season 3. And I started writing guide content, so explaining complex things happening in pro play to the average gamer. And that eventually got me noticed by a couple of esports sites. And when you go from getting paid $0 an article to $25 an article, you think you have made it big. And everything has kind of like snowballed from there. I have written for Riot Games, I've written for Red Bull, I've written for the Esports Observer, I've been featured in ESPN, and I've also done numerous of things like being a pundit on esports shows, as well as, like I've said, taken some of my skill set from college, which was also being a safe space coordinator and safe space trainer at the SUNY Albany campus, and used all of that skills to start doing diversity and inclusion consulting in esports. Like I said, working with Cloud9, Ateo, and a couple of other brands you may or may not have heard of.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Jessica, would you like to tell us about how you got started in your career?
Of course. Yeah, I think I had a pretty linear path after high school, but my start was really young in design. So I'm a senior designer now, but I really got bit by the design bug in middle school. I'm from a pretty rural community in Georgia. My dad actually started an internet service provider to get us internet in the town. And there's some fun newspaper clippings of me at the first LAN party in my county that we hosted to like announce that there was wireless internet. So definitely got my start kind of designing like Second Life skins and like Neopets related content when I was in like middle school. Took that through high school into web design competitions, and then went to Georgia Tech for my undergrad in computational media, which actually had a pretty great curriculum in terms of game design. Got to design an Atari game, a Game Boy Advanced game, played a lot of World of Warcraft during that time, and I think when I graduated I did pivot more towards product design, but the love of gaming has always been there. So I feel really lucky to have come full circle back into games with PlayVS and designing experiences for competitive play.
Awesome, that's great to hear. So still keeping on that career question line, how do you guys think that students can prepare themselves for entering this industry?
So I'll start because I've been working a lot with like some of the local colleges. One of the things, and I think this is true for anything, whether you end up wanting to do esports, do medicine, journalism, product design, is start making those connections while you're still in school. There's a bunch of websites that put out internships. There's always teams making tweets about looking for internships. Or if there's a team that you're like really about, like let's say it's Cloud9, reach out to somebody who works at the org, go on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I'm a junior at SUNY Albany in the marketing program. And even if it's just, can I talk to, Emily for a bit, who's one of their senior product designers now, but she used to be in the brand and marketing. I just want to like learn about this. And you'd be surprised how often those like conversations you do your junior year, your senior year, sometimes your sophomore year can like roll into career opportunities when you're older. I know from my brother getting me involved in NSBE, which is the National Society for Black Engineers, like doing that type of stuff has opened a lot of doors for me in my consulting career, because there are companies that are looking to improve the way that they interact with the LGBT community. So the first thing I'll always say is don't wait until you're graduating. Don't wait until like April, March to be like, man, I really need to figure out this job thing. No, like whatever you think you see an opportunity, go for it. And the worst case scenario is that you're still in the same place that you are. Saying no is never a bad thing because you can always reach out to them and be like, hey, what did I need to do better? Right? You're in college, you have a kind of a safety net. Take the time to figure out what you want to do and talk to as many people as possible.
That is excellent advice. Like literally excellent advice that I give to people as well. Like not waiting until you graduate to start your career, not waiting and just doing it. Whatever you want to do, just starting now and preparing to do the worst work, right? Preparing to do.
Lindsey, can you like turn your gain up or something? You got real quiet.
I'm sorry, did you want me to be louder?
Yes.
I can do that. So doing the Charlie work, if anyone watches It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, if you want to get into, for me, if I wanted to get on a paper with a big name, I would be like, who do you want to do your statistics? I'll do your statistics. I'll edit it. I'll do, for typos, everything, preparing it and not being above any sort of work. I also think a really good thing is getting on social media. I built GamerDoc entirely on social media for 2 years before I was allowed to actually work. I started with Twitter and then YouTube and then Twitch. Getting on Twitter, social media is amazing because you have the opportunity to dialogue with anyone you want, right? If you want to talk to the CEO of Evil Geniuses, Nicole Jameson is on Twitter. She's on Twitter and she responds to her replies.
Hey, Lindsey, I apologize to interrupt, but we still cannot hear you very well.
You unplug your microphone because now you're muted.
While we wait, I might chime in to give a little bit of advice while she troubleshoots. But my advice for students is definitely to follow your interests. So realize what you're excited about, what classes you look forward to, what side projects you actually want to spend time on when you're procrastinating. And then realize that networking to me doesn't really exist. Like you already have a network, like you have people that you've worked with, your peers, your classmates, your research advisors, your TAs. Like those are people that have seen you and watched you grow and you've gotten to grow alongside them. So they're going to be the people that you hopefully get to, work with and leverage and have those friends of friends connections, either, in person or through social media from now on. So, make sure that you're, putting your best foot forward with that network early. And also if you're in the design hustle, even if you're not in college, I think the Twitter dribble Instagram pipeline is really strong. Just start getting your work out there.
ArtStation.
ArtStation. Get in some discords with some other designers. It's a pretty open community for folks that are, welcoming. So do it.
How is my audio now?
Chat, Steven, can you hear her now?
Good. Terrible.
It's still pretty quiet for me.
I've literally never had microphone issues, and this is the fact that the last time I was on a PlayVS panel, my dog started barking.
You're getting better. The chat is lighting up that they can hear you now.
Okay, what if should we do ASMR instead?
ASMR panel.
Please interrupt me if I get too quiet. I will try my best to speak loudly and fix this.
Chat says you're good now.
Okay, good. So, getting your name out there before you graduate is really important. Getting on Twitter, making a professional Twitter account, one that has a professional photo with a bio that's created, one that you avoid sensitive topics. It's hard to avoid politics right now. But avoiding, discussions of religion, not just retweeting like Rick and Morty memes, but actually finding the conversation that you want to be a part of, finding the industry leaders and having discussions with them. So if you want to be a League of Legends commentator, finding the top League of Legends commentators, finding the shoutcaster, finding the color commentator, following them, putting notifications on for them, and then every time that they tweet something, replying to it, replying with something intelligent. And if you do that, the people who see, so if that person has, Amanda, what's a good lol caster?
I'll self-plug and say the one I just interviewed, Freak.
So getting on Freak's Twitter, and say Freak has 500,000 Twitter followers. Every time you reply to that tweet, you're going to get 500,000 people being able to look at that. And all of those people are interested in League of Legends. And if all of those people see you in the replies with something intelligent and not like a jerk comment, but something that takes a little bit of thought, your name is going to be associated with that eventually. So getting on social media and using that free marketing, right? 20 years ago, if you wanted to get your name out there, you had to pay for it. And now all you need is a telephone. All you need is a cell phone, and all you need is social media. So getting on social media and using it correctly is a big one for me.
Definitely, as a social media manager, I would have to, echo those sentiments. Making sure your Twitter is professional and networking. Social media is a great tool. Moving on to the next question. Were there any challenges you guys faced early on in your career? And if so, how did you overcome those challenges? Amanda, if you want to go first.
Oh, sure. So I am a non-cis passing trans woman of color. It's one of the reasons why I call myself the esports unicorn. There are not a lot of people like me in esports. And that was kind of a roadblock a lot of times. Not so much in my writing career, because you don't have to see the person whose article you're reading. You just need to read the article. But, I've had people tell me that they didn't work with me in the past because I was trans and that made them uncomfortable. I've had teams. I've had people recommend to me to present more masculine when working with certain teams. And, when I was younger, which in fairness, I started working in esports pretty old. Like, I started my esports career when I was like 26. So I was like pretty sure of who I was and what I wanted to be. It didn't bother me too much, but it did affect like the leagues that I wanted to work with. So I spent more time in the fighting game community, which is a little bit more, because the word community is in it, is a little bit more community centric than some of the bigger esports, right? Because, you get more face time with some of the pro players in a fighting game community. But yeah, I guess the short answer is yes, I faced some roadblocks, and my quick advice is don't let other people's perceptions or expectations define what you can do. For those of you who are League of Legends fans, look at Indiana Frusker in Black, who recently chopped off all her hair for Worlds because she got tired of trying to like meet cis obligations. As a commentator, because a lot of the feedback she used to get as a commentator was that, she looked like a man. And so she grew her hair out so that she could be like more visually acceptable for fans. And she's gotten to a point in her career where she's like, nope, that's it. Going back to being queer as fuck. Ooh, language, sorry. But yeah, so like if Indiana can do it, if I can do it and work with big brands like Red Bull, Ateo, Cloud9, then you can be whatever you want to be and still have a place in the industry.
Dr. M, if you have anything to add.
Oh, sure. So medicine, kind of like esports, is dominated by people who look a certain way. And inherently, as like humans, we tend to associate with people who look like us. And sometimes that's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious. So medicine, I was not being given a lot of opportunities because I was the only woman who worked there. And I was the only queer person who worked there. So one of the things when I first got my job is they hadn't hired another woman in that position in about 6 years. So I was around 26, cis male physicians. And it was difficult because they automatically assumed that I wanted to do pediatrics, right? I wanted to do pediatric rehabilitation because I'm a woman, right? Well, of course I do. Of course I want to raise children of other people's children. And I wanted to do sports medicine. I was like, I want to do sports medicine. And the way that you get a sports medicine job is you do a bunch of free sideline coverage. So you're the one on the sidelines of the high school football games while your boss gets to go to the NFL games. You're the one on the sidelines of the D3 college games when your boss is at the D1 college games. And I wasn't getting offered opportunities because they assumed I didn't want them. And people kept being asked, you know, to the golf course, to the country club of you know, one of our bosses, and that's where all the relationships were being made. And in medicine, just like esports, a lot of career opportunities come from relationships. They come from someone, you know, someone recommends you for the job, or the person asks you for your recommendation on this person and you know them, and you know, so that was something that really struck me in medicine, and it's one of the reasons why I left traditional medicine, right? I didn't like the conversation that I was in, so I started a new conversation. And that's one of the reasons why growing the field of esports medicine, I'm trying to change the narrative. So I have a textbook coming out next year, which is going to be like the first textbook on esports medicine, and of the authors, 2 of them are queer women and 1 of them is a BIPOC female. So it's you know, doing advocacy and doing that sort of thing when you get to that position is really important. But yeah, not given opportunities because I you know, am a female. So
Jessica, would you like to talk about your experiences?
Yeah, I would say kind of to echo both Amanda and Dr. M, earlier in my career, I think I kind of came in with like bright eyes and enthusiasm. Like I thought I had a thick enough skin, but I think you realize that some of the hurdles that I had to overcome is that you have to be your own advocate. People will not immediately think of you, you know, as me, like a young, you know, feminine presenting queer woman. I was, you know, just didn't know that I wasn't being offered opportunities. But I think also I did not know that all of the advice I was being given, maybe I should have taken with a grain of salt really early. So making sure that if you're early in your career, you're getting feedback, not just from your manager and your peers, but people that you trust and you respect, and that are also maybe more inclusive.
I think that is great advice. So we're going to move on to our next section, which is building a more inclusive and safe space, which I think is incredibly important. So we believe that esports has the potential to be the most inclusive sport, but we see a huge disconnect between reality versus this possibility. How can esports programs at schools build a space that makes their players feel safe? Amanda, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So as someone who like built safe spaces at colleges and high schools, I think one of the things to first realize is that like there's a difference between an inclusive space and a safe space, right? And I'm sure a lot of you college students probably know this from being on college campuses, hopefully progressive ones, that there's a difference between, you know, a club saying, oh, we're open to everybody, right? Versus a club that like actively promotes diversity and inclusion and has a lot of bylaws to sort of make sure that people feel safe in it. So the first thing, and this is a thing I'm a huge proponent of, I've been a huge proponent since I was a Magic the Gathering judge, working with AnyKey, is make sure that your club has some form of bylaws that doesn't just address like, you know, how you're supposed to perform in a game or, you know, showing up to practices and all that, but also like behavior. Because one of the things I think a lot of people take for granted is that you think that because you have a shared interest or because you're in the same age group that you guys have this sort of like social contract that you're all going to naturally adhere to, you know, the Will Wheaton, don't be a dick. But like the truth is that everybody's definition of like how those things work vary drastically culturally from person to person. Things that are totally acceptable to me as somebody who's from downstate New York originally is probably completely different to like things that are acceptable to Dr. M and Jessica, right? So you have to make those type of things like very clear so that everybody's opting into the same level playing field. And when you do something like that, you really allow people to meet each other on an even field so that once those really bad situations may occur, which you never hope that they do, you're also reprimanding people under like clear understanding. Because the worst case scenario is to be like, hey, you shouldn't do that. And the person goes, well, why? And you're like, because you're bad. And then you create like a you versus them mentality. And then it becomes really difficult to like course correct behavior. So you want to make sure that whenever you're in these type of situations that you have those bylaws. So that way people feel like, you know, oh, I broke the contract, not, oh, you're making me out to be a bad person.
that's a excellent point. It's just such an excellent point. It's like you do this for a living or something. I don't
Oh,
know.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think something that also is really important is being like Amanda's being nice, but like saying there's zero tolerance for all forms of discrimination. Like this space has zero tolerance for all of these things, for homophobia, sexism, racism, transphobia, fat phobia, everything, and listing it out, and then enacting it, right? So if someone does it, making sure that it is a zero tolerance and not a warning kind of space, right? Because if someone breaks those rules and you don't follow through, then it's no longer a safe space, right? Then it's no longer, then everything that you've just built up and said doesn't matter anymore. And for us, that seems obvious, right? It does. But some people don't think that, fat jokes are harmful. Some people don't think that making fun of people for their IQ is harmful, right? And a lot of times people say things that they don't mean. A lot of people are just jerks, right? A lot of people are just jerks. But some people are just a little bit ignorant, right? Some people come from a place where everyone looks like them, everyone has the same experiences as them. So, for example, when I started this job that I was talking about, I was sitting in the call room with all of my male colleagues, and they were saying, "That's so gay." And they would say, like, they would call someone a fag, and they would say all these other things. But I was the first lesbian they had ever knowingly met. I found that out later. They had never met a lesbian before that they knew of. So the fact that someone in that room was getting offended was brand new information to them. It's easy to say things when there's no one around it's harming. But all of a sudden, when there are people around you who it is harming, that can be game-changing. But when I did correct them, when I did set them on a course correction, like, those guys have become my staunchest advocates, some of my best friends. I went to their bachelor parties this past year. So some people are just jerks and don't deserve your time. But some people are just a bit ignorant and need like a little bit of education.
And I would add to that, I think if you are responsible for creating a safe space, it's a reminder that you are responsible for maintaining that safety. So if you are not providing avenues for folks to, report that there has been discriminating behavior, you need to give them anonymous ways to do it. You can't place the burden on the member of the community because they're already burdened. You're there to help keep that space safe. So make sure there's clear, available, and anonymous ways to give feedback. Because once that trust is lost, it's really lost. I've been a part of spaces where trust has been lost, and it's really hard to recover.
Definitely. And I don't know if this is too specific of a question, but for someone like me who is like a student leader, and isn't like an adult in the club who works at the school, like, how would you suggest a student leader enforces these, policies? Because sometimes I feel like, maybe people in my club don't think I'm an authority figure, even though I am a leader in the community. So do you have any advice to that? Any of you?
Cultivate trust. The first thing that makes you a leader and makes you somebody that people respect and want to listen to is cultivating that trust. One of the things I always tell people about like my Twitter presence, and we've talked about that a lot today, is I don't waver in a lot of the opinions that I have. And if I give Riot Games a lot of crap about something, I will give PlayVS a lot of crap for the same thing. Or if, Blizzard does something I don't like, and then, Riot does it right the first time, but then Riot does it wrong and Blizzard does it right the second time, you do it. So you just have to have that consistency so that people know that you're never speaking from a place of like emotion, but you're just like, nope, we've agreed as a club that like this type of behavior is not okay. And I'm unilaterally stepping in and saying, this is not okay. You cannot do this. Another thing that I recommend, especially from the point that Jessica made at the end, is a really great way to promote anonymous information is to make regular feedback forms that you're like, hey, it's time for feedback form number 1. I would like, if there's 20 people in the club, I would really like it if I got 10 feedback forms. And then you just kind of slowly increase that number so that at least by the last feedback form for the semester, you're at 20 of 20. And then that's a great way. It reminds people, oh yeah, there's this way that I can talk to the coach or to the advisor in an anonymous fashion. We do have a question that I kind of want to quickly address in the Q&A part, where someone is asking, as an advisor or club president, how do I best prevent your space from becoming one where at-risk people opt out of being involved? And how do you make people who are marginalized feel supported? The best way to do that is to reach out to the communities that you think you're not already having in your club. So for example, when clients ask me, how do I have more Black people at my company? I say, hire more Black people. And what I mean by that is reach out to historically Black colleges and universities for your career fairs, reach out to campuses that specifically have high demographics that you're looking for in the specific field that you're looking for. Don't just be like, oh, wow, this campus has 14% African Americans. I'm going to do a career fair. And then you find out that 14% is like only in business and social work and not in STEM, right? So if you feel that you don't have enough queer students on camp in your group, go to the Queer Alliance. Be like, hey, I represent the League of Legends Club. I represent, the Esports Club. And I know some of you play Fortnite. I know some of you play X game. How come you're not a part of this club? And really sit down and listen. And then you take that feedback and you start making it known. Maybe we're doing a Pride fundraiser. Maybe we're doing a Trans Lifeline fundraiser. Show them that not only are you about having them as members of your club, but you're about putting support into their communities. And that will really show the people who you think are marginalized that you're not just about words. And again, like I said earlier about saying a space is inclusive, you have to show that's inclusive.
That is fantastic advice, and I can't wait to implement that into my own club.
Sheridan, do you mind if I piggyback off that really quickly?
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. What Amanda's saying, it also really resonates with me because I started a nonprofit this year called Queer One of Esports. And in the beginning, we were just using pure Twitter and word of mouth marketing. And when we needed something, we would put it out to the Twitterverse. I would put it on my Twitter. Another board member would put it out to their Twitter. And what we found was that our population was a lot of white people. It's a lot of white people. And I was posting to my Twitter, right? To my Twitter. And I didn't ever think of this before, but a lot of people who follow me are also white. So in the future, when we started forming panels and events, instead of posting it to socials, we first reached out to certain groups and populations that we felt were not represented in our company and in our community. And it's hard, right? It's hard in the beginning, and it can be hard, and it can be really easy to get defensive. It can be, because when you're trying your best, when someone brings up something, it can feel like a personal insult. But who is more tired of that? The people who've been discriminated against for years and years and years and years. They're more tired than you, right? They're more defensive than you. So I think it's really important to not, when people do give you feedback, to not get defensive, because you're going to grow and you're going to learn as a person and as an organization by listening to that feedback.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. So how are digital and physical spaces different and unique? And how do you suggest the leaders approach each? Because, when you're on social media or when you're on Discord, there's a little bit of anonymity, which can fuel people. So how would you suggest that we, leaders, companies, whomever, how do you suggest we approach each of those? Amanda, would you like to start us off, or Jessica, anyone?
Jessica, do you want to go first, since I've been constantly going first?
No worries. Yeah, I unmuted, so I'm going to hop in. I think, when I think about physical space and I think about digital space, in physical space, you just have so much more control. You know what room you're in. You can see the faces of everyone. You can kind of like maybe read some body language, understand a little bit of intent. I think in digital spaces, I think my biggest concern, especially as someone who's trying to run, a very like queer inclusive organization at PlayVS, is that you have to be aware of the spaces people are in. So they're calling in from their homes. Maybe they're not out to their family members, or they're calling in, in places where I think if you're in a physical space, you know what's being recorded and what's not being recorded. You know if someone is taking notes or not. So having really clear rules up front about, recording of what's being said, who said it, if that's allowable or not, the topics that you're discussing, what questions and answers are talked about in the group, I think is really important, setting that kind of agreement up front with everyone involved, and just knowing that you're going to have a little bit less control in a digital space. If something leaks and there are negative consequences, like as a leader, you have to own up to that. So far, at least being in the PlayVS like lovely bubble, I haven't experienced any negative side effects. But yeah, just know that, especially on a college campus, you have to be aware of that.
Definitely.
So one of the first things that, because I can answer both Haley Phillips' question and your question kind of at the same time. So the first thing, because anonymity is kind of a issue when it comes to Discord and stuff. So a policy that I have for one of my Discords is that anybody who joins my Discord has to fill out a Google form, and they have to tell me what their Discord ID is. And then if you want people to feel like, if people don't agree to that, well, whoops, sorry, can't be in the Discord. Because like, especially for a college setting versus, the PlayVS Femme Fatales, COD team, right? Where it's just like, we just want to like get together and play COD at night. Like that's completely different, right? Like someone's rude or whatever, we just kick them from the server and, we deal with it later, right? But when it's a school setting, especially for a club, there's a lot of things that go into like removing people from clubs, handling those situations. And so you really need to not allow too much anonymity. So that's a great way to sort of kind of keep some of those same space things that you have in real space versus digital space. Another thing is you have to have active moderators. And that means that you can't, like, you have to, this is really hard and it's, a lot of responsibility at a college level, but you need to be like, who can be looking at the Discord on a frequent basis from, 10 a.m. to noon, who can be looking at it from noon to 4, who can be, and really setting up these like dedicated mod shifts so that there's never this feeling where something happens and then like all the mods are having to play catch up the next day and it's just devolved into a fire pit overnight. Like that's never great. And to answer Haley's question about do I think that anonymous forms for feedback are suggestion or having, an open Discord chat. So one of the reasons why I talk a lot about having anonymous forms is marginalized people often don't have great experiences with power structures, especially ones where there's authority. A lot of marginalized people deal where either, in high school or some level of their life, an authority figure has betrayed them, or they have learned that authority figures don't always have their backs. So having an open Discord chat where like, it's like a room that you go into and you like say like this happened, like even if it's just the mod team, you're in this pressure where you feel you have to answer all of your problems yourself. And a lot of people, even think about yourself, you don't always want to be the one that solves all of your problems. Sometimes you want to pass it off to your parents or to your RA or to somebody. And so anonymous feedback really allows for that situation. Now, I understand, Haley, that you say that you have a 1,500-ish Discord community, but that just means you have to put more safety levers involved. That means, involving maybe your Office of Student Success or some other branch of the school to maybe help you come up with a system of developing better mods. So that way your mods are more trained for this anonymous feedback and you can have more mods. But honestly, especially for situations like this, like the ones we've been addressing on this panel about creating safe and inclusive spaces, you really want to take the pressure off of the minorities or the marginalized to not be their own heroes and their own advocates. You want to definitely put power into something that they feel safe about. And one of the safest ways to report any type of incident is doing it anonymously, and knowing that that feedback is looked at in a timely fashion and is implemented, and any sort of reprimanding is implemented, which I'll answer a separate question later in the panel.
I think, yeah. So that's like a beautiful point. When you are a marginalized group, there is an inherent risk for advocacy. There's a risk to advocating for yourself. If you're the only queer person, if you're the only BIPOC person, if you're the only trans person, you will get labeled. You will get, you know, the angry Black woman, right? Like that stereotype is terrible. And it comes from having to advocate for yourself, like the diva, the woman who is the diva because she wants there to be trash cans in a unisex stall, right? It's an actual thing that happened. So, you know, when you are not in a marginalized group, or you're in a marginalized group, like I'm in a marginalized group, right? I'm queer, but I am a femme-presenting cis white woman. So no one's offended by me, right? No one is going to get mad at me. My physical body is never, you know, threatened more than another woman's. So when you're not in that marginalized group, or you're in a less marginalized group, being the one who says, this is something we need to do, being the one who is looking at the systems we have and the systems that exist and advocating for people who aren't you is very, very, very important. Also, I just want to circle back to the safe spaces online. Something that's really important to think about that I have to discuss is that internet access is a privilege. A lot of people out there don't have high-speed internet access or high-quality internet access. So if you are demanding video chat from your club, from your group, that is a hurdle that a lot of people can't overcome. So making sure you know what sort of internet access people have, or not necessarily knowing, but making sure it's inclusive, making sure there is a call-in option is also important.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was just gonna, because we're talking about safe spaces a lot. So Jordan and Christopher both have a similar question, which is how do you deal with zero tolerance policy breaking? So and Jordan's way of asking the question is a little more structured, and it's one question I often had: how do we handle zero tolerance in a way that feels inclusive and safe? A lot of gamers come from toxic communities, and I want to help make our club a place where people from different communities can feel safe and have fun together. So one thing, and this is sort of a concept that is a little abstract to some people, but it's going to sound like plain old English when I say it. Just because your space is inclusive doesn't mean you have to include everybody. Now, one of the important things about a safe space is that you can have clashing of ideas. The reason it's called a safe space is that it's supposed to be done in a way where everybody feels comfortable expressing divergent opinions. And, you know, you can say, you know, I'm a fiscal conservative and not just immediately get like lashed at, or you can say something about being queer and not worry about repercussions from that. But on the flip side, sometimes, you know, even though, you know, Dr. M really made a great point about, you know, meeting people in the middle and like helping them understand that maybe they're a little bit ignorant. Sometimes you just have to recognize that if somebody is somewhat toxic, that they gotta go. And it's gonna feel terrible, right? Because you're in a club. The purpose of being in a club is what? You wanna have fun with people with shared interests. And kicking people out of your club doesn't feel great. But you also have to measure what is the harm being done by allowing people to stay in that space. And for Christopher's question, because it's a little bit broad, like how do you handle violation of zero tolerance policy? It really depends on like what that violation is and what your policy is, right? If like you have a no hate speech policy that you have zero tolerance on, maybe that's you can't be in the Discord for a while. Maybe that's you're not allowed to come to practice for a bit. Or if you come to practice, you're not allowed to talk. You can sit in and do VOD reviews and stuff, but you know, you kind of don't get to have the speaking stick, right? There's a lot of ways to handle something like that. But if it's something more aggressive, like targeted harassment or repeat offenders, like again, the ban hammer exists for a reason. And it's because you're at a certain point, you have to realize that not everybody can be educated. And so sometimes people just kind of have to go. And maybe they come back, you know, the next semester and they're like, hey, you know, I've had time to think about it. I would love to be maybe you develop a probationary system where somebody can come back in a semester and be like, hey, I think I've learned my lesson. I really want another chance. And I understand that I'll have to be on probation. Maybe that means they can't compete on the league team or they can't compete on the Overwatch team. But it's also a good way to have probation to sort of give people that redemption, because people can learn, but sometimes in those immediate situations, you can't risk the safety of other people on the hope that a person is, as we say as a meme in the esports community, reformed.
How would you handle that balance between, like kicking someone out / punishing them versus like, trying to educate them? And is it our place to educate them? I hope that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And a great way to do that is a lot of forward thinking in your club. That's why I put a lot of stock in having really strong bylaws, but also maybe having to make a judiciary group inside your group, right? Because for a lot of esports clubs, they're also the school's internal esports league, right? Or, you're a club like Haley's size where it's like 1,500 people. And sometimes you don't want to kick everything to your school's judiciary board. So maybe, once again, that's reaching out to your school judiciary board and being like, we have 1,500 people. We want to be able to handle things internally, but we're a bunch of college students. We don't know as much as we could know. What should we do to create a judiciary board? And just like you vote for your treasurer, your comptroller, you vote for the people who are on your, as League of Legends fans who have maybe played in the before times, you vote for your tribunal. And these are the people that are kind of held to a little bit of a higher standard in the club. And they are the ones that work with the club president, vice president, and the advisor and the coach on handling these issues. And so that way, one, everybody in the club feels like they had a voice in a sense in handling these problems because you voted these people onto the board. And two, it's not one person, it's not two people, maybe it's 6 or 7 people who make this decision. And so it also feels like it has this sort of arbitrary level of fairness, that it's not, oh, well, these 2 people are friends with that person and they got to make the decision on whether or not I got kicked out of the club. Because again, you never want that us versus them mentality. You want to make it feel like it's the community coming together on these decisions.
And I wanted to add one more thing, which is if you're responsible for that safety, know when to escalate, know whenever it's beyond your ability to do your own judiciary committee. If you need to go to the highest level within your organization and within your college, within your school, do it. As even not that visible woman in like STEM and gaming, I've experienced doxing, stalking, the kind of more negative experiences. And those are things that you probably can't solve on your own. So make sure if there are to be bigger consequences that you're going through the right avenues.
Definitely.
And being able to recognize that, like I said, is, working with like your school's judiciary committee or something like that, so that, because one of the things, like, I don't have a degree in what I do as a diversity inclusion consultant. I go to a lot of panels, I talk to a lot of experts, I go to a lot of workshops, I do a lot of reading. So the way that you get that comfortableness, Sheridan, and everybody in the chat, is you go to the people who do know what they're doing and you say, hey, I want to learn how to do this myself. Definitely.
And I feel great, asking these questions and trying to find out how to, make my community better. We also have my club president in the chat as well, so he's probably taking some notes and helping, the cause. So we have one more question in the question and answers, and it is, how do you personally deal with uncomfortable situations of others making unnecessary or unwelcome comments about you in spaces like Discord where these safety measures aren't in place?
We'll start. There was a time in my life where I thought that like low-level sexual harassment was just going to be a daily occurrence. When no matter what you look like, no matter who you are, people are always going to say stuff, right? They're always going to say stuff. And first of all, something that was really important to me, I let a lot of comments slide in my medical training. I let a lot of comments slide going through training. And then one day I realized that if this physician was saying the same thing to me, like a 20-something year old med student, he was probably saying it to other people. And I have more confidence than some people. I have, I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to be controversial. And that thought that if it's happening to you, it's probably happening to other people, can be really empowering, because it's not about you anymore, right? It's about other people. It's about other people who are probably being harassed just like you are by the same person. And so having, no tolerance for it, it still happens. It still happens. I still am on a panel with people in esports, and then I get a DM the next day about my performance and how it was great, and there's always like a little comment in there. But being able and having the power to stand up and say this is not okay. If it is sexual harassment, if it is something like that, reporting it. You don't need to talk to that person ever again, right? Report it to the person who's above them. Go through your channels, anonymously report it. If it's low-key uncomfortableness, if you're just a little bit low-key, it's borderline, you're not sure, that's never going to stop unless you say something about it. The inherent urge as a female sometimes is to laugh and change the subject. I'm going to laugh, I'm going to change the subject. I'm still cool. People still think I'm cool, right? Being like, dude, that's not cool, right? Just saying, dude, that's not cool. I'm not cool with that. Just call it. You don't have to be. I feel like there's so much pressure in college, and there's so much pressure in esports to be cool. You can be cool, but stand up for yourself, and you can be cool and stand up for, your sisters and your brothers and everyone.
So my comment, Annabelle, is very similar to Dr. M's, of just like having some amount of self-confidence. But if you don't have these systems in place that I've been, advocating, one, get them in place. Like tomorrow, you hit that emergency meeting button, and you sit down and you look. I'm hip. I know the memes. All right. But you get, don't you laugh at me, Dr. M. But you get those systems in place, because that's how you're going to make these situations happen less and less. Is that there's clear ways of dealing with them, there's clear ways of punishing for it, and that's going to create a much safer space, which is point of this panel. But in those situations, I guess it really depends, right? If someone is sexually harassing you, maybe that's contacting your campus police, or that's SUNY Albany has a women's advocacy office, so that's usually where a lot of those questions go to, or those situations go to, if you're not feeling comfortable with your campus police. If it's something physical, I was a big proponent of programming. In this situation, the only thing you can really do is have campus police on your phone. An actual campus police phone number. I don't know how many of you are like new to college or have been at college, but 911 doesn't go to your campus police. It goes to your local police precinct, and then they have to take your call and reroute it to your campus police. And if you're in a physically unsafe situation, time is important. Be aware of where your blue light phones are. Every campus has these. They're phones for emergencies. It's really good to know where those are at all times, where they are in your relative position. And I know that these sound like really extreme kind of answers, but unfortunately, especially if you're in a physical space and something's making you uncomfortable, you don't have a lot of agency all the time to deal with it yourself. So you need to know how to deal with them through the systems of the school. Now, when it comes to stuff on like Discord, right? Again, that's, how comfortable are you with your admin team for your club, with your advisor, with your coach, and really, if you feel like you can talk to them openly about a situation that happened. Sometimes there's nothing you can do safely in the moment without potentially escalating the situation, because not all of us have, conflict resolution skills, but at least knowing who you should talk to and who you feel most comfortable talking to. And if it's another club member, maybe you say, hey, I had this situation, I felt uncomfortable. I don't feel very comfortable being an advocate for myself. Are you comfortable being an advocate for me with me? And then you two together talking to somebody, right? There's a lot of things that you can do, and it's all about your comfort level. So it's about figuring out how you're feeling at that moment, checking yourself and saying, my comfort level is green, which means very good, I feel great. Or is it yellow? It's really pushing it. Maybe I need to disengage. Or if it's red, and that's when you really need to, like I said, hit that emergency meeting button and like instantly get yourself out of the situation. So becoming really clear with yourself about what those different emotions feels like, and being able to check yourself, will really help you in those situations.
And I would add, I think whether you're in a physical or digital space, if someone's coming at you in bad faith, set a hard boundary. If you're digital, someone's DM'd you, I don't respond to that kind of messages. If you're in a more public group, we don't tolerate that here. And I would say, if it's more in person, still try to take time, just in the way that you might screenshot that interaction, put it in a folder, and if you need to, forward it. Do that in a physical space by, once you're past maybe the fight, flight, or freeze response, if it's really aggressive in the moment, take your phone out, document the time, what was said, what occurred, how it made you feel, because those are going to be the notes that are invaluable if it does escalate.
Definitely. Do you guys have any, organizations that are already creating safe spaces, either, in collegiate spaces or not in collegiate, that you would like to point out or as examples for how esports programs can learn from them? If not, that's okay.
So I'm not only am I a PlayVS Game Changer, I am also an AnyKey affiliate. They do a lot of research and coordination with collegiate esports programs. So if you're looking for an idea of how to do guidelines, or you're looking for, how to just generally make your club inclusive, they have a ton of resources on their website, and that's anyKey.org. So that is the first and foremost thing that I would recommend, because that's their purpose, right? Is to create inclusive and diverse spaces in esports and on Twitch. So they've done a lot of academic and practical research for these topics.
I got a second AnyKey. TL Taylor is just an absolute genius. And AnyKey's fantastic. Of course, I'm going to shout out Queer Women of Esports. We're doing our best up here. I am putting anonymous reporting and anonymous suggestions on the website tomorrow. And this is like a perfect example. It's like, you can always get better. You can always do better. You can always try harder. And so if you're interested in getting involved in advocacy in esports, we have a mentorship program that is the mentee application opens on Monday. We are offering you very high quality mentors in the esports industry. The quality of our mentors are actually astounding. So if you're interested in getting into the esports industry, the mentee applications open on Monday. And we have a Discord server that you're more than welcome to join. So, a little biased, so that's fun.
And I have to plug PlayVS Game Changers as well. If you're, you're obviously here, so you might know more about it. But if you haven't, go to playversus.com/game-changers. See all of our great folks that have become a part of it. And I hope you get to play with us as well.
And thank you again to all of our panelists for amazing advice throughout the entire, panel. Is there any last anything else that you'd like to leave our participants with?
Sure. I'm going to speed answer an anonymous question.
Perfect.
So if you're the anonymous attendee, I'm not going to read your question. You'll just know that I am answering it. One of those, when you're in those situations like that, the best thing to do is to, like I said to the earlier question, know your resources on campus, know who advocates for you, and you don't have to deal with the situation on your own. I know that when you're dealing with situations like that, you feel in that red zone, right? And so it's really hard to always know the right thing to do, the right thing to say. But knowing who your advocates are on campus, they're going to be way more equipped than you to handle those type of situations. And if you don't know who those advocates are for you on campus, please reach out to me. I'm Amanda T as in taxi, N as in net, Stevens with a V on Twitter. You can DM me. My DMs are open. This is true for anybody. And I will do the research for you for your campus to help you figure out what those resources are.
Thank you so much.
Sheridan, thank you so much for hosting this panel. Thank you to my co-panelists, and thank you to PlayVS for bringing to light this, this really important topic that a lot of people don't know a lot about. So this is great. So thank you all for having us.
And I think I'd like to leave us also with this, gratitude for my panelists and Sheridan, you especially, for these great questions. But also, when you think about safe spaces and the spaces we're trying to promote, there really is an opportunity to share joy and community in ways that, not everyone has had the opportunity to experience with like-minded folks. So it's really great work to do. I'm excited that people at the college age are involved in that work so early, and I look forward to working with y'all in the future.
Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be posting the recording on playvs.com, and we will share the recap on socials. I believe they also email out the VOD as well, so keep an eye on your emails if you want to, watch it back, take notes, anything like that. For more information on the PlayVS Game Changer initiative, visit playvs.com/game-changers. In the meantime, be sure to connect with us on @PlayVS on socials to learn about the next panel and whatever else we have going on. And thank you again. This was an absolute honor.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.